Jesus told him about some Galileans who were killed, and as they were offering sacrifices, they were worshiping. They were worshiping the God of Israel, and Pilate had them killed. And we aren't told about the circumstances for the slaughter, and we don't know if they were doing anything wrong. In fact, if they were worshiping, what could they be doing that was wrong? And I can only speculate here, but because of the response that Jesus gives, I don't think that they were asking about the actions of Pilate. They must not have been calling out Pilate for his violence, because Jesus doesn't respond to the violence. Instead, Jesus responds by asking if they think that the reason these Galileans died was because of something that they did. Now, human nature wants a reason, right? We don't like random. We don't like chance disaster, because chance disaster means that we might have the same thing happen to us, and we want to prevent that at all costs. Now, when I read this passage this week, I immediately thought of the shooting in the mosque at Christchurch, New Zealand. And the next incident that Jesus brings up is about something completely different than that. He talks about a tower falling and killing people. Another random disaster that folks try to explain, right? Now, unfortunately, humans still haven't learned that sometimes bad things happen to people that did nothing to deserve it. And I can't help but think of the flooding in Nebraska and Iowa in that way. The shooting and the flooding. Why did these things happen? Now, in the last week, there have been several attempts to explain this. Just for example, a prominent politician in Australia, in their parliament, released a statement that said that it was the immigration program that allowed Muslim fanatics to migrate to New Zealand in the first place that caused this. In other words, it wasn't the shooter's fault, it was the fault of the worshipers. It was the fault of the victims. Now that's horrible. But it's not uncommon, unfortunately. Because something similar was said after Molly Tibbetts was murdered. You name a time, we keep repeating these mistakes. Now, I haven't heard anything yet about blame for the flooding, but it's early. I wouldn't be surprised, because when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, there were several Christian leaders, including Pat Robertson, very famous guy, said that it was God punishing a sinful city. Now, Jesus was saying that God didn't do this. God didn't cause the violence against the Galileans because of some sin they committed. God didn't cause the tower to fall on people because of their sin. God didn't cause someone to open fire on two mosques because of some sin they committed. And God didn't cause flooding in Nebraska and Iowa because of sin. But then Jesus says something you might not expect. In response to each of these statements, Jesus says, "But I tell you, unless you change your hearts and lives, you will die just as they did." Wait, what? I mean, that almost sounds like Jesus is saying that sin is the cause of their deaths. And if you keep sinning, then you'll get yours too. But that doesn't sound like Jesus, does it? I mean, we wouldn't expect Jesus to condemn. He didn't condemn the Samaritan woman. Jesus didn't condemn any of the people that he healed. Jesus didn't condemn the woman who was about to be stoned to death. So what could Jesus be saying here? I think the next paragraph may give us a clue. Jesus tells this story about a fig tree. The fig tree hasn't produced fruit for 3 years. And what is the purpose of a fig tree? To produce figs, right? And so it wasn't doing what it was supposed to. And this made the owner of the tree unhappy, so he ordered it to be cut down. But the gardener wasn't ready to give up on it yet. The gardener pleaded with the owner to give the fig tree another chance. Give it one more year. I'll even take care of it. I'll give it extra care. Let's see if that will help it to produce again. The gardener is full of hope for the fig tree. He believes that it can do what it's supposed to do. It's a hope backed up by a commitment from the gardener to the tree. Now, remember that when Jesus shows up on Easter morning, he shows up as what? A gardener. Jesus is the gardener and we are the trees. And even when we don't live out our purpose, Jesus is still willing to care for us. Jesus is still hopeful that humanity will change their hearts and their lives. Jesus is hopeful that we'll understand that it isn't God that causes these things. And yet we still need to take care of business. So I don't think that Jesus is telling us that our sin is the cause of these things that happen to us, right? Jesus is not engaging in victim blaming. And so there must be some other reason to tell us that our sin isn't any greater than those who died. So perhaps he's telling us that we are the same as the victims. We're the same. Actually, New Zealand's Prime Minister said that this week. She said that the victims of the shooting are us. We are them. It's a statement of solidarity. It's a statement of support. We are them. She's saying that the victims are not to blame for this. She's saying it's tragic for everyone. It's not us versus them. We are them. And tragedies happen to us. And whenever they happen to anyone, they happen to us. And so what are we to do about this? What are we to do? I started the day wondering if we would ever learn from our experiences. And maybe this time. Will we ever learn that we can't go through the glass? Maybe this time. Will we ever learn that stuff happens and that when it does, God cries with us? This time. This time. This time. I think we will, actually, because I'm hopeful. I think we will because the gardener is full of hope. And I hope that we are full of hope. I hope that we will never lose that hope, because that hope will sustain us. That hope is the very thing that compels us to help each other. That hope is what compels us to keep on going. That hope is a gift from the one that is hope. Maybe next year we will do what we're supposed to do. Maybe this time we'll make the right decision. Maybe this time we will broaden our definition of family to include those that we're afraid of. Maybe this time we will include those who are excluded. Maybe this time we will love our neighbor. Maybe this time we will love our enemy. Maybe this time. This time. This time. I choose to hope. I choose to believe that we can do better. And I choose to believe that we can change our hearts and lives. I choose hope. Will you choose hope? Let's pray. God, thank you for this teaching. This teaching that tells us that you are not the cause of the bad stuff that happens in the world, but you're right there with us as it does. Thank you for teaching us that Jesus wants us to think that we are like those folks that died, and not to say we are not like them. We don't deserve this kind of thing. They didn't deserve it either. We're in this boat together. And so we can make the choice to wallow, or we can make the choice to hope. So help us to choose hope. Help us to see ourselves in the place where Jesus cares for us as he cares for those who are suffering in the world. And maybe this time we'll make the better choice. In your name we pray.